ladies and gentlemen, to Da Vinci Tree's online learning. All the staff here and myself have been living in the internet now for 5 weeks and 2 days. It's a long time to live in the internet. We don't have any announcements for you today, but I do have the fantastic and infallible, no, that's not the right word. What's another alliterative word? The fantastic and favorable, no. Anyway, Miss Frusty's here with us, everybody. Yay, Miss Frusty. Okay. Do you have a joke for us today?
I do. It's just as good as my other ones.
Excellent.
Did you hear about the restaurant on the moon?
I did not, no.
Has great food, but no atmosphere.
Because it's on the moon.
Because it's on the moon.
Because it's on the moon. I love it. Okay. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get to the pledge for the day. Ready?
Stand at attention, please, kids. Take off your hats and hoodies. Put your right hand over your heart. Face a flag and follow along.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry. Thank you, Ms. Fruity. That was fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, have another great day of online school. As you all probably have heard already, this is coming to a close very soon. So, we're looking to having you guys back with us as soon as possible. Yeah. All right. See you later, guys. Bye. Welcome back to Da Vinci Tree Online Learning for 7th and 8th grade. We are on week 5, day number 2. Let's go ahead and go over the agenda for today. So, first up in life skills, we are summarizing our discussion about homes, and then we are going to review our discussion about appreciating and depreciating assets and what that means. Next, in our current events and economics class, we are going to be discussing the terms supply and demand and going over what those mean in an economics context. Next up in history, we're going to be discussing labor issues in the Gilded Age. We're going to be discussing labor unions and labor battles or issues that they had over labor in the Gilded Age. Next in literature, we're going to not really be doing anything today because we don't have to do a recap. We're just going to be assigning you your homework for tonight, which is to read Chapter 8. Then in science, we're going to continue with our discussion on sinking and floating, discussing buoyancy. In math, group number 1, as promised, we are looking at the volume calculations for cones, spheres, and pyramids. Today we're emphasizing cones. Yesterday we did a review of cylinders. And then in math group number 2, we are doing more linear programming, and we're doing some Khan Academy practice. We are taking some Khan Academy lessons that were specifically designed for students in India, and we're going to be doing a little bit of practice using that because it's really set up well. All right, so let's go ahead and get to it. There we go. Okay. All right, so, one thing I didn't mention in the introduction is I firmly believe that every student should go to school every day expecting to learn something new. And sometimes, especially for online learning, learning something new doesn't necessarily have to take a lot of time. So today I'm going to try to teach you new things, but without taking up that much time in the video to make it a little bit easier for you, because I know many of you are still struggling to get caught up, and the shorter the video, the better. So, today, to summarize, buying a house is an excellent investment to create wealth for yourself in the long term. It's not something that you need to be thinking about as a middle schooler, but again, it's a good idea to plant the seeds now in your mind so that as you grow up, you'll be always kind of planning in the back of your head that one day you're going to become a homeowner, because then that will allow you, by owning a home, you'll be able to begin to accumulate wealth in the form of equity, the amount of that home that you own. And then one day you'll be able to pass all of that value onto your own children or family, and you begin to create that generational wealth. Or One day you can even take out a loan against your home and start a business or buy something really nice. Again, buying rather than renting for your home is a great way to store value. Okay? And so that's basically the short and long of it. There's a lot of different things involved. We just kind of scratched the surface and went over some basic stuff that you probably ought to know. So the idea of home ownership is important because it's important to understand that in life there are certain things that you can own that become more valuable over time, and there are many other things, most things in fact, that you own that become less valuable over time. Okay? And so a home is one of those rare things that becomes more valuable over time. Okay? And so other things that you can purchase that become more valuable over time would be things like collectibles, okay? Collectible baseball cards, like a Mickey Mantle rookie card, or like basketball cards, like a Michael Jordan rookie basketball card, or something like that. And so small items like collectibles can appreciate in value over time, but not always, so you have to be careful, okay? And property, like actual real estate property, like buying land or buying a home, those tend to appreciate over time. Also, certain commodities can also appreciate over time, like buying things like gold. Typically something like gold, the price of gold goes up and down, but the general trend for gold over generations is that gold slowly becomes more and more valuable over time. And so certain assets appreciate over time. Now, again, most assets depreciate over time. So the point is you should focus most of your money and most of your wealth as you grow into an adult on assets that appreciate and become more valuable over time, rather than assets that depreciate and become less valuable over time. All right? And that leads us to our discussion beginning tomorrow, talking about cars. Cars depreciate in value over time, and they are very expensive. So you should do your best to try not to waste money buying cars. Okay? All right, that's it for our life skills lesson for the day. Let's go on to current events and economics. Yesterday, in our current events and economics, we discussed these two new vocabulary terms. So let's review them together now. So the first one was producers and suppliers. So producers and suppliers can be either people or companies, okay, that create goods or services. A good could be something like an orange, okay? An orange is something that you can buy at the store. It's a good. Or it can be a service, okay, such as a tour, okay? You can pay for going on a tour of a cave or a tour of some kind of attraction, okay? So a good is something that you can buy and physically hold in your hand, and a service is something that somebody does for you, okay? You could pay for a cleaning service. Somebody could come and clean your home. That would be a service, and the person who's cleaning your home is a producer or supplier of that service, okay? The next word that we went over yesterday was consumer. A consumer is somebody who uses up the good or the service that the supplier is providing, okay? So the supplier or producer creates the service or good, and the consumer uses the service or good, okay? Simple enough. Now, everybody is both, okay? Depending on what your parents do for a living, they produce certain goods and services, and then all of the other goods and services that you use and that they use, you consume. So you're a consumer of certain goods and services, and you can be a provider or supplier of others. And so everybody is a little bit of both, okay? All right, so let's go down to our new vocabulary words for the day. So the first new vocabulary word is supply, okay? So supply is defined as the amount of a good or service that a producer / supplier is able and willing to supply. or I should say to create. Okay? So supply is the amount of a good or service that a producer or supplier is able and willing to create. Now, there are two very important words here that I want to highlight. Okay? The first one is able. Okay? Able, and the second one is willing. Okay? So the supplier has to not only produce the good in a certain amount, they have to be able to produce it, and they have to be willing to produce it. They have to want to produce it. Okay? We'll get to that in just a second. Okay? We'll talk about that a little bit more. So let's talk about demand. Demand is a term that means the amount of a good or service that a consumer is able and willing to use up or purchase. Okay? And the same words are going to be highlighted here. Okay? So we're going to take a look at the word able and the word willing. Okay? So let's talk about what that means. All right? Let's take, for example, let's talk about high-end cars, since we were just introducing the idea of cars in our life skills talk. Okay? Some suppliers of very fancy cars, okay, like sports car companies and race car companies, sometimes they'll only produce one car. They'll only produce one race car, and that race car will race in, like at Daytona or at the Indy 500 or something like that, or in the F1, okay? And those race cars, even though the company is able to create more of those race cars, they don't want to. They're not willing to create more of those race cars. So the supply of those race cars or those sports cars is very small, because the companies, even though the companies that make them, they're able to create more, they don't want to. They're not willing to. Okay? And so that's why the supply of certain high-end cars is very small. All right? Let's talk about demand. Okay? I would love to have one of those fancy sports cars or one of those fancy race cars. Okay? I would love to have like an all-electric SUV race car, like an I-Pace or a Tesla Model X. Okay? I am willing to buy it. But guess what? Those cars typically cost $150,000. I am not able to buy it. And since I am willing, but I am not able to buy it, my enjoyment and liking of that vehicle is not counted in the vehicle's demand, because demand is only counted for consumers, such as myself, who are not just willing to buy it, but they're also able to buy it. They have the money and the credit to be able to go out and buy it. Okay? So in economics, supply is the amount that a producer or supplier is able and willing to create or supply. Okay? And demand is the amount that consumers are able and willing to use or purchase. Okay? So again, those two words, being able and willing, are really important. And so tomorrow we're going to begin to talk about supply curves and demand curves and how supply and demand meet in order to set market price and market consumption. Okay? And so we'll get to that tomorrow. But again, today we're just learning about the word supply and demand. Let's go ahead and jump over to history. All right, so during the Gilded Age, we saw two powers kind of confront each other and collide, okay? We saw the power of labor, organized labor. So people who were the everyday workers, like you and I, banded together in order to demand better pay and better conditions for their working environments. Many of these places where people worked were very disgusting and very dangerous. And many people had to work very long hours, hours that we would consider today to be completely inhumane and insane. but back then, people were regularly forced to work those hours. And so organized labor got together and rallied all the workers together to create protests and other things like that, usually peaceful, but sometimes not so much, to protest the really poor conditions that people had to work in during the time. And so the power of organized labor met up against the power of business during the Gilded Age, and these two powers collided and created all kinds of issues. And so today we're going to be reading about organized labor and how labor came together. Certain labor unions was what they're called, organized labor. People got together and they called the clubs that they would form, the workers' clubs, they would call them unions. And so places that had these workers' clubs were called unionized places of work. And some of these labor unions still exist today. For instance, the AFL-CIO that you're going to be reading about is still a labor union that influences American politics today and is still pushing for things like protections at work and better standards of living for everyday workers. And so today we're going to be reading about them, and we're going to be reading about some of the big protests that happened and the what do you call it? I guess the sometimes violent collisions that labor had with business and government. Okay, and so go ahead and make sure that you're clicking on those two links in Khan Academy to read about both of those things. All right. Well, thank you very much, and it's time for us to jump over to literature. All right, ladies and gentlemen, for literature, there is actually nothing new. We don't have to review the chapter because we actually read it together yesterday. So tonight for your homework, we're going to be reading Chapter 8 of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. So go ahead and read that. Make sure any of the vocabulary words are written 5 times each, and make sure that you give me the definition for those. Again, those have to be handwritten because when you're writing them 5 times each, you're learning how to spell it. We can't do spelling tests now because we're, doing all of this remote, and so we need you to kind of get that practice so you get used to the use of these new words that you might not be used to in your everyday vocabulary, so that you can begin to build those vocabularies and use more and more what I like to call expensive words. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and read Chapter 8 tonight and make sure that you get us those spelling words 5 times each, vocabulary words, 5 times each, and the dictionary definitions. Thank you much. All right, so today for science, we are going to be learning about buoyancy from a video that you're going to be watching from Fuse School. Tomorrow we're going to be reading more out of the book about the same subject, buoyancy. So yesterday we began the discussion by talking about sinking and floating. So basically it's all related to density. So if you are in a giant ship, even though the ship weighs a massive amount, depending on the size, the ship is actually less dense than the water that it's displacing. And it has a specific gravity that is different than the water. And so, gosh, what else do I want to say about this? I don't want to go into it too much. I just want to let you guys watch the video discussing buoyancy. Now, additionally, whenever I have the opportunity, I always like sharing my silly love of Monty Python in Search of the Holy Grail. And so just for fun, I'm also including a link to that where they're discussing the whole idea of the movie is that people in ancient Britain were not incredibly intelligent. If you've ever heard of the book A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain, it kind of makes fun of the idea of the Knights of the Round Table and how unscientific they were back then. I'm also including this video clip from Monty Python's In Search of the Holy Grail discussing the way that people in ancient Britain kind of used to do quote-unquote science. And it's just really cute and a lot of fun. So if you want, you can watch that. It's not part of your homework though. So please go ahead and watch the Fuse School video on buoyancy and density and how things that are less dense will float. And once you're done with that, that's it for science for today. It's pretty straightforward and easy. For Group 1 Math today, we're going to be talking about, as you can see on the page, the volume of pyramids, cones, and spheres. Okay. Now, for cylinders and prisms, the same shape on the top is the same shape on the bottom. And so it makes finding the volume easy. We just find the area of the shape, and then we figure out how tall the figure is, and we multiply those, and that gives us our volume. But for these shapes, the pyramids, cones, and spheres, the shape on the bottom is there, and then they come to a point at the top. And so calculating the volume of these shapes is much, much different. Okay, so we're going to be reading through this today out of the book, out of our math book, and then we have 2 links that you need to start working on Khan Academy. And today the Khan Academy links are going to focus on finding the volume of cones. Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. So if you pour sand from a pyramid-shaped container into a prism-shaped container with the same height, base shape, and base size, you will discover an interesting relationship. Okay, so again, as we look over here at this picture of the gal pouring the looks like a gravel or a sand, right? So the pyramid has a square base. Okay. And the rectangle, or the rectangular prism that she's pouring it into, also has that same square base, okay? But one is a pyramid and one is a rectangular prism, but they're both the same height and they both have the same base. So again, if you pour sand from a pyramid-shaped container into a prism-shaped container with the same height and the same base shape and base size, you will discover an interesting relationship. The prism-shaped container appears to hold 3 times as much sand as the pyramid-shaped container, okay? So again, the prism holds 3 times the sand of the pyramid, okay? In fact, the volume of a pyramid is exactly 1/3 the volume of a prism that has the same height, base shape, and base size as the pyramid. The height of a pyramid in the perpendicular distance from the height of the pyramid is the perpendicular distance from the pyramid's base to its vertex. Okay? So, the formula for calculating the volume of a pyramid is volume equals 1/3 the base area times the height. Okay? 1/3 times the base area times the height. So again, finding the volume of a pyramid, we have to figure out the base area. So in this example, the base area is 3 by 5, which is 15. And then we multiply it by the height of 4. 15 times 4 gives us 60. And then we have to multiply it by 1/3, which gives us 20 centimeters cubed. Okay? So again, the base area times the height times 1/3. Okay? Same thing right here, except we have a triangle. Okay? And so for the triangle, the base is 6 feet, the height is 4 feet, okay? 6 times 4 is 24, all right? And because it's a triangle, we have to get half of 24, which is 12. And then we multiply that by the height, which is 9, okay? So 12 times 9 gives us, what, 108, is that right? And then we multiply that by 1/3, and that gives us 36, okay? And so again, same process that we're going through, okay? Let's see. So let's keep on going here. The volume of a cone is 1/3 the volume of a cylinder with the same height and a congruent base, okay? So it's the same idea, except instead of having a triangle or a rectangle as the base, now we have a circle, okay? And so a cone is just like a pyramid, except it has a circular base. So again, let me read that. The volume of a cone is 1/3 the volume of a cylinder with the same height and a congruent base. The height of the cone is the perpendicular distance from the cone's base to its vertex. So the volume of a cone is 1/3 the area of its base, which is pi r squared, okay, times its height, h. So again, the volume of a cone equals 1/3 pi r squared times h. So finding the volume of the cone, and so here we have to calculate the area of the circle. So if the radius is 3, 3 squared is 9, So we get 9 times pi, which I don't know off the top of my head, okay, times 7 to the height and 1/3, 65.94, and they just round it to 65.9, okay? So again, it's the same idea. We get the area of the base, times it by the height, and then we divide it by 3 or multiply it by 1/3. Same thing. Dividing by 3, multiplying by 1/3, same thing, okay? Volume of a sphere. Now this last one is different, and because it's different, I'm going to save it for tomorrow. So today we're just talking about pyramids, and we're talking about cones. And for your Khan Academy lesson, you're going to be working with cones today. Okay, so make sure you click on those links for Khan Academy and get that done. All right, thanks guys. That's it for math. Have a great day. Group 2, we're on to you next. All right, this is week number 5, day number 2 for group number 2. So group number 2, we started discussing linear programming yesterday. And just to review, when we're doing linear programming, all we're doing is we're setting up a system of constraints using our inequalities. And we figure out where our constraints limit us. And then in order to find the objective quantities, maximum and minimum, we take those constraints and we take the most extreme ends of each constraint. Okay, our constraints here are this area in blue, and so the most extreme ends would be the vertices here, here, and here. Okay, and then once we figure out where the vertices are, we plug those vertices into the objective quantity equation, and that gives us the objective quantities amounts at each one of those extreme ends. Okay, so again, one more time, we take the system of inequalities, okay, such as a system like this right here. We graph it out like this right here. Okay, we would take every extreme vertice or every vertice, because those are the extreme endpoints, and we would plug it into our objective quantity. So here it'd be 1, 5, here it'd be 4, 5, here it would be 1, 2, and here it would be 4, 2, okay? And we would take our objective quantity, which for this problem is this right here, and we plug in each one of those vertices, and we calculate out the x and y values to figure out our maximum and our minimums, okay? And that's how linear programming works. Now, I'm not going to lie, I was going to sit down and kind of do a couple practice problems with you right now, but I left my iPad next to my sleeping baby, and I don't want to go in there because she is a very light sleeper. And so I'm just going to let you guys off the hook for today, okay? We do have a Khan Academy lesson to go over systems of inequalities, okay? We're going to be doing, I think, 2 to 4 systems of inequality quizzes this week through Khan Academy. The one thing I want to warn you about, I'm not going to make you watch any of the systems of inequalities lessons, because I think that we've been going over this enough. You should be able to do it without watching these lessons. However, when you are completing the practice quiz, make sure that when you are typing in your variables, because you actually have to type out inequalities, make sure that your variables are the correct upper or lower case, okay? Khan Academy's quiz questions are case sensitive when you're typing in your answers. So make sure that you are, if they're giving you like capital F or capital X, make sure that those letters are capitalized. If they're giving you lowercase f and lowercase x for your variables, make sure that they're the correct case. Okay? All right, that's it for today. Go ahead and click on the Khan Academy link to practice your inequalities. Okay? All right, thank you very much, guys. You have a great rest of your day, and I hope you learned something in this shortened class day. Again, trying to fit all the material in to a shorter package. All right, thanks, everybody. Bye.